I didn't scream when the pain started. That's the first thing people always assume, that it came in loud, dramatic waves that I cried out and made a scene. But it didn't. It came quietly, deep, like something inside me had shifted just enough to remind me that my body was not being listened to. I was lying on the narrow hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the small cracks that looked like maps of places I'd never been. The room smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. Machines hummed softly around me, steady and indifferent. I pressed the call button once. Nothing happened. The pain tightened, not sharp yet, just heavy, like a warning. A nurse eventually stepped in. She was polite, efficient. Her smile stayed on, but her eyes didn't linger on me long. "Doctor will be in shortly," she said, already turning away. I nodded. I had learned not to ask too many questions, not to sound panicked, not to be difficult, especially here. When the doctor finally arrived, he didn't introduce himself. He glanced at the chart before he looked at me, and even then it felt like his eyes skimmed past instead of settling. White coat, silver watch, calm confidence that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times and didn't expect anything unusual tonight. "So," he said, flipping a page, "you're experiencing abdominal pain." "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, but it took effort. "It's getting worse." He nodded once, the way people do when they're listening just enough to appear engaged. On a scale of 1 to 10, I hesitated. I'd learned the math of this question the hard way. 8, I said. He raised an eyebrow, almost amused. 8 is severe, he replied. You're speaking pretty calmly for an 8, I swallowed. I'm trying, I said, but something feels wrong. He gave a small smile, the kind that's meant to reassure but somehow does the opposite. Anxiety can amplify discomfort, he said. Your vitals are stable. He glanced at the monitor, not at me. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not tears yet, just pressure. I know my body, I said quietly. This isn't normal for me. He finally looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression shifted, not concern, not curiosity, skepticism. "You've been under stress?" he asked. "Yes," I answered, "but this feels different." He scribbled something on the chart. "Stress manifests physically," he said. "Especially in patients who are sensitive." Sensitive, the word landed heavier than it should have. "I'm not asking for medication," I said. "I'm asking for help." He sighed softly, like I was asking too much. "We'll monitor you," he said. "Get some rest." And then he left, just like that. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that felt final. I stared at the ceiling again, my hands trembling now. The pain had grown sharper, more insistent. My breathing came shallow, careful, as if taking in too much air might make it worse. A tear slipped from the corner of my eye and ran down toward my ear. I didn't wipe it away. I pressed the call button again. This time, a different nurse came in. She checked the monitor, adjusted my IV, avoided my eyes. "Doctor says you're stable," she said gently. "Try to relax." "I'm not okay," I whispered. She paused just for a second. Then she smiled sadly. "I know, but he's the one who decides." When she left, the room felt smaller. The pain surged again, stealing my breath. I clenched the sheets, my fingers curling into the thin fabric. Another tear followed the first, then another. I wondered how many women had lain in this bed before me, trying to explain pain that didn't fit neatly into charts and averages. I wondered how many of them looked like me. The monitor beside me beeped steadily. A calm, reassuring sound meant to signal that everything was fine. I focused on that sound, letting it anchor me, until it changed, just slightly at first. A hesitation between beeps, a stutter. I frowned, my heart beginning to race, not from fear but from recognition. Something was happening. I pressed the call button again, harder this time. The monitor beeped again, then again. Faster, louder. And for the first time since I arrived, the machine seemed to be listening to what my body had been trying to say all along. I didn't know it yet, but the moment the monitor changed was the moment everything in that room was about to turn upside down. The monitor didn't scream right away. It hesitated, like it was unsure whether it should interrupt the calm lie of the room. A sharp beep slipped through the steady rhythm, then another, closer together this time. I turned my head toward it, my chest tightening as if my body recognized the warning before my mind did. I pressed the call button again. My fingers were slick with sweat now. The pain had spread, no longer confined to one place but radiating outward, stealing the air from my lungs in shallow pulls. "Please," I whispered, though no one was there to hear it. The door opened a moment later. 2 nurses stepped in, their movements practiced, efficient. One glanced at the monitor, the other checked my IV. "It's probably just a spike," one of them said calmly. "A spike from what?" I asked. My voice shook despite my effort to keep it steady. "Something feels really wrong." They exchanged a look, not alarmed, not urgent, familiar, tired. "You're anxious," the first nurse said gently. "Try to slow your breathing." "I am breathing," I said. "It hurts to breathe." She smiled, the same sad smile I'd seen earlier. "The doctor will be back soon." Soon. That word stretched thin when you were lying in pain. They adjusted the monitor, quieted the alarm, and left again. The door closed softly, like I hadn't just asked for help. The pain surged harder this time. It felt like something inside me was being pulled tight, twisted. I gasped, my hand flying to my abdomen. Tears spilled freely now, soaking into the pillow. I hated that part, the crying. I hated how it made me feel exposed, like I was confirming something they already believed about me. Too emotional, too sensitive, not reliable. I tried to sit up, but the room spun. I sank back onto the bed, breath coming in short bursts. The doctor returned a few minutes later. He didn't rush, he didn't look concerned. "What's going on?" he asked, already checking his watch. "The pain is worse," I said. "The monitor," he waved a hand dismissively. "Monitors overreact sometimes." He looked at the screen briefly, then back at the chart. "Your labs are fine," he said. "There's no indication of anything serious." I stared at him. "Then why does it feel like this?" He sighed again, that same tired sound. "Pain is subjective," he said. "Especially in patients with high-stress responses." High-stress responses. "I told you," I said quietly, "this is different." He met my eyes for the first time with something sharper than skepticism. "You need to trust the process," he said, "and trust me." Trust, that word felt hollow. He turned toward the door. "I'll check on you later." Something inside me snapped then, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet break. "Please," I said, "just stay a minute." He paused, hand on the door. "Yes," he said, already halfway gone. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know you think I'm overreacting, but I'm scared." For a brief moment, something flickered across his face, annoyance, discomfort, Then it disappeared, replaced by clinical distance. "You're safe," he said. "Try to rest." The door closed. The pain peaked shortly after. My body curled inward despite my efforts to stay still. The monitor began to beep again, louder now, faster. The sound filled the room, sharp and insistent. This time, no one silenced it. A nurse rushed in, eyes finally widening as she looked at the screen. "Wait," she said. "That's not—" The alarm went off fully then. A harsh, blaring sound that cut through the quiet hallway. More nurses poured in. Hands moved quickly now, pulling at sheets, adjusting lines. Someone called out vitals. Another grabbed equipment. The doctor returned, his calm finally cracking. "What's happening?" he demanded. One of the nurses pointed at the monitor. "Her numbers are dropping." He stepped closer, his confidence faltering as he read the screen. That's not possible," he muttered. I watched his face change in real time, the certainty draining from his expression, replaced by something new. Fear. I wanted to say "I told you so." I wanted to shout it, but I didn't have the breath. The room blurred at the edges. The beeping grew frantic. Hands pressed down on me, voices overlapping, urgent now. "Get imaging. Call it in. Now." As they worked, I lay there, my tears still falling, my pain finally undeniable, not because I'd been heard, but because a machine had spoken for me. And in that moment, as the doctor stared at the monitor in disbelief, I realized something that settled heavy in my chest. My pain had never been invisible. It just hadn't been believed. And the cost of that disbelief was about to be very, very high. The room was no longer calm. It moved around me like a storm, people stepping in and out of my vision, voices sharp and urgent, hands firm where they'd once been hesitant. The bed shifted as someone raised it. Cold air brushed my skin as they pulled back the blanket. I tried to focus on one thing, anything, but the pain made it hard to think. It wasn't just pain now, it was pressure. A spreading heaviness that felt like my body was fighting itself. "Stay with me," a nurse said, leaning close. Her voice was louder than before, but softer too. "Look at me," I tried. My vision swam. The doctor stood at the foot of the bed, staring at the monitor like it had personally betrayed him. His jaw was tight. His confidence, so solid earlier, had cracked. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "Her labs were normal." "Labs don't rule this out," another nurse snapped, already pushing equipment into place. He looked at her sharply. "What do you mean this?" She didn't answer him. She turned to someone else. "Call radiology. Stat." Stat. That word carried weight. I'd heard it before on television, in dramas that felt far removed from real life. Hearing it now, connected to my body, made everything feel unreal. "What's happening to me?" I asked. My voice sounded small, distant. No one answered right away. The nurse who had stayed by my side squeezed my hand. "We're going to find out," she said. "You did the right thing asking for help." I almost laughed at that. Almost. Because I had asked over and over. They rolled me through the hallway, lights passing overhead in quick flashes. The pain pulsed with each movement, sending sharp reminders through my body. I clenched my teeth, trying not to cry out. The doctor walked alongside the bed now. Silent, focused, not looking at me. I watched him instead. His posture was different, shoulders tense. Steps hurried. The man who had dismissed me was gone, replaced by someone scrambling to catch up to a truth he'd ignored. In imaging, the room was cold, too cold. They positioned me carefully, asking me to stay still. I did my best, though every second felt like a test I was failing. The machine hummed. Time stretched. When it was over, they wheeled me back, the pain still raging, but something else rising with it, fear. The doctor and another physician stepped aside to review the images. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see it in their faces. The shift. The moment understanding landed. The second doctor looked at the first sharply. "How long has she been like this?" He hesitated. "Several hours." "Hours?" the second doctor repeated. "Why wasn't this caught sooner?" Silence. The nurse by my side didn't look away. She watched him steadily, her jaw set. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling at me, but the pain wouldn't let me drift far. When I opened them again, the doctor was standing over me. He looked different now, paler, careful. "You're experiencing internal bleeding," he said. The words hit me harder than the pain. "Bleeding?" I repeated. "From what?" He took a breath. "A ruptured condition that wasn't visible on initial labs." "So I wasn't imagining it," I said quietly, his lips pressed together. "No," the room was silent. I waited for an apology, for something that acknowledged the hours I'd spent unheard. It didn't come. "We need to prep you for surgery," he said. "Immediately." Surgery, my heart raced. Am I going to be okay? He didn't answer right away. That pause told me more than words could. "We're going to do everything we can," he said finally. As they rushed to prepare me, the nurse leaned close again. "I'm here," she said. "You're not alone." I believed her. As they moved me toward the operating room, I caught one last glimpse of the doctor. He stood back now, watching others take control. His authority had slipped away, replaced by quiet reckoning. And as the doors swung open and the lights grew brighter, one thought burned through my fear and pain with startling clarity. If they had listened earlier, I didn't finish the thought. The anesthesia mask lowered toward my face, the world fading at the edges. The last thing I saw was the monitor above me, still blinking, still steady now, still speaking. When I woke up, everything had changed. I woke up to quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that presses in on you, reminding you how close you came to not waking up at all. The ceiling above me was unfamiliar. Softer lights, different shapes. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or why my body felt so heavy. Then the pain returned, duller now but deeper. I shifted slightly and felt the tug of tubes, the steady beep of a monitor beside me. The sound was slower than before, controlled, alive. A nurse noticed my movement and stepped closer. She smiled gently, like she didn't want to startle me. "You're in recovery," she said. "Surgery went well." I swallowed. My throat felt raw. How long was I out? Several hours. Hours, I let that sink in. Hours where my life had been held together by hands that only took me seriously once a machine screamed for attention. "Am I okay?" I asked. She nodded. "You're stable. You were very close, but you made it." Very close. The words echoed long after she stepped away. Later, another nurse came in, then another. They checked my vitals, adjusted machines, asked me to rate my pain. Everyone spoke softly now, carefully. No one dismissed me. My family arrived that evening. My mother's face crumpled the moment she saw me. She tried to be strong, but the fear spilled out of her anyway. My sister held my hand like she was afraid to let go. They told me what I hadn't known. That my blood pressure had dropped suddenly before surgery, that the surgeon had said minutes mattered, that if things had gone on any longer, I might not be here. I listened quietly, my chest tight. That's when the anger came, not loud, not explosive, cold. It settled in my bones. The next morning, the doctor came back, the same one. He stood in the doorway for a moment before entering, like he wasn't sure he was welcome. His white coat looked the same, but he didn't. "I wanted to check on you," he said. I looked at him, really looked this time. The man who had waved away my pain with a tired shrug, the man who had decided I was exaggerating. "I'm alive," I said. "Yes," he replied. "You are." He stepped closer. "The surgery was successful. The team did excellent work." The team, not him. I waited. He cleared his throat. "What you experienced is rare and difficult to diagnose early." "But not impossible," I said. His jaw tightened slightly. "No." Silence stretched between us. "I told you something was wrong," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled beneath the blanket. "I told you I was scared, and you told me I was fine." "I based my assessment on the information available at the time," he said carefully. "And the way I looked," I asked. He blinked. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." The words hung there, heavy and undeniable. He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was lower. "I regret that you felt dismissed." Felt, I almost laughed again, almost. "This isn't about how I felt," I said. "It's about what almost happened." He nodded slowly. "An internal review will be conducted." An internal review. I turned my head away, suddenly exhausted. "That's not for me," I said. "That's for the next woman." He stood there for a moment longer, then quietly left. After that, things began to change. A patient advocate visited me, then another doctor. They asked questions, real ones. They listened. They took notes. I told my story again and again. Each time, it felt less like a wound and more like a record, a truth being placed somewhere it couldn't be ignored. One nurse told me, quietly, that this wasn't the first time complaints had been made. That landed harder than anything else. A few days later, I was strong enough to sit up, to walk slowly down the hall, to feel the weight of survival settling into something like responsibility. Because I was still here, and someone else might not be. As I rested that night, staring at the dim light above my bed, I realized something that both terrified and steadied me. The monitor had saved my life, but my voice should have been enough. The next morning, the hospital felt different. Hallways that had once seemed sterile and impersonal now felt heavy with the weight of what had almost happened. I moved slowly, still tethered to my IV, still feeling the raw ache of being ignored, but alive. Alive and furious. Word had begun to spread quietly among the staff. Nurses whispered in corners. Technicians exchanged glances. Some offered sympathetic nods when they passed by my room. Others avoided me, as if proximity might somehow implicate them. I realized the ripple of my experience was already reaching farther than I thought. My advocate returned, a calm presence with a binder full of notes and policies. "We're taking this seriously now," she said softly. "The administration wants a full account from everyone involved." I nodded. I wanted to believe her, but I had learned not to trust words alone. I wanted to see action. Later, the doctor reappeared, the same man who had dismissed me. He looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of the monitors, the alarms, and the near miss had shrunk him. "I've reviewed your file," he said carefully, avoiding eye contact. "Protocols will be updated." I swallowed hard. "Protocols don't change the minutes I spent ignored," I said. "Protocols don't change the fear I felt when I realized you weren't listening. Minutes matter." He shifted uncomfortably. You let me down," I said, my voice steady now, "and it almost killed me." Silence filled the room. For a brief moment, he seemed to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. But I didn't need him to understand. I needed the system to acknowledge it. By afternoon, the story had begun leaking beyond the hospital walls. Someone had filed an internal report that made its way to the media department. Soon, the hospital administration was receiving calls, emails, and messages. Concerned citizens, patients, even lawmakers wanted answers. I watched the news cautiously. They told the story in brief headlines, careful to avoid names at first. "Patient nearly overlooked in critical condition," read one. "Hospital faces scrutiny after emergency oversight," read another. Each headline struck me like a hammer, painful yet validating. Then the emails started, hundreds of messages from strangers. Some shared their own experiences, stories of being dismissed, ignored, or silenced in hospitals. Others offered support, empathy, or encouragement. I read each one slowly, feeling the weight of collective understanding. Days passed, and the internal investigation unfolded. Staff interviews, video reviews, policy audits. I sat through some of the meetings, quietly observing. Doctors and nurses were questioned. Some admitted negligence, some tried to deflect. But the truth was coming into focus, unstoppable now. The turning point arrived unexpectedly. The hospital board called for a press briefing. Cameras filled the lobby. Reporters jostled for position. And then the CEO spoke. "We take patient safety and equity seriously," he began. His eyes scanned the room, briefly meeting mine. "Recent events have revealed serious shortcomings in our protocols and practices. We are implementing immediate reforms, retraining staff, and holding those responsible accountable." My chest tightened. Accountability. A word I hadn't expected to hear in this room, not so soon. Then he did something I hadn't anticipated. He invited me to speak. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, the patient who had been dismissed, whose pain had been minimized, whose voice had almost been ignored entirely. I stood slowly, steadying myself on the edge of the podium. My voice trembled for only a moment, then grew strong. "I nearly died because my pain was ignored," I said. "Not because I was wrong, not because my symptoms were invalid, but because I wasn't believed. That ends now. No one should feel powerless in a place meant for care. Listening saves lives." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, but I didn't falter. I let the words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. After I spoke, the CEO nodded solemnly. "Thank you. Your courage will guide our reforms." It was a small victory, not the kind that erased the fear or pain, but the kind that demanded recognition, the kind that turned humiliation into influence. That night, alone in my hospital room, I reflected on everything that had happened. The dismissal, the near death, the monitor that screamed what words did not, the courage it had taken to speak, and the courage it had taken for others to listen. And then something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but power. Because being heard, truly heard, is a kind of survival in itself. The following morning, the hospital was quieter than usual. Hallways still smelled of antiseptic, but there was a tension in the air, a hum of awareness. Staff moved with measured steps, glances lingering a little longer on monitors, on charts, on each other. The silence was different this time. It carried accountability. I sat upright in my bed, watching through the window as the sun spilled gold across the city streets. Nurses came in and out, offering care with an attentiveness I hadn't seen before. The same faces that had once ignored my pain now paused at the threshold, checking vitals twice, asking questions slowly, deliberately. They were nervous, almost reverent, as if they knew something had changed irreversibly. And then the pilot entered the room. Not the head of the hospital, not the administrator, but the pilot of the medevac flight that had brought me here after the emergency was called. His presence was calm, understated, but the weight of it was unmistakable. He approached, looking at the monitors, then at me. "You should have never been dismissed," he said quietly, his tone steady but sharp, slicing through the residual fear I had carried. "The alarms don't lie, your body doesn't lie, and neither should anyone tasked with your care." I swallowed, blinking back tears that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with relief. Relief that someone finally named the truth aloud. Relief that someone in authority wasn't afraid of it. He nodded toward the door. "The board is meeting. They're reviewing the incident. And they want to hear from you first." Before I could respond, the CEO entered, flanked by administrators and senior medical staff. Cameras had been set up discreetly for a formal statement that would reach the public. But right now, it felt intimate, real, necessary. "You've seen the reports," the CEO said, his voice controlled. "You've heard our promises. But now we need to hear the truth from the patient herself." I rose slowly. Each step toward the podium felt like lifting the weight of every dismissal I had ever endured. The room watched, silent, almost breathless. "I was ignored," I began, my voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. "I was dismissed. My pain was minimized. I nearly died because I wasn't believed. And the worst part, people in uniforms, people trained to help, treated me like I didn't belong." The words hung in the air. Murmurs rose in the back, whispers of shock and acknowledgement. But I didn't pause. "But today," I continued, "someone listened. The alarms spoke. And for the first time, truth could not be ignored, because ignoring it would have consequences." The pilot nodded from the side, steady as a sentinel. I caught the eye of a nurse who had avoided me before. She held back tears. The room, once sterile and indifferent, now felt human, raw, and alive. "I want everyone to know this," I said. "Dismissal kills. Listening saves. Accountability is not optional, it's necessary. And I will not let anyone forget that." A silence followed, heavy and reverent. Then, one by one, the staff began to clap. Quietly at first, hesitant, then with growing conviction. Even the administrators joined, their faces tight but sincere. The CEO stepped forward. "Effective immediately, all staff involved in this incident will undergo retraining. Policies will be reviewed, and this hospital will implement systems to ensure no patient is ever ignored again." I felt a wave of relief, tempered by the gravity of what had happened. The humiliation, the fear, the near death, They hadn't disappeared, but they had transformed. From private trauma into public accountability, from dismissal into change. Later, as I prepared for discharge, the pilot leaned close. "You changed more than procedures today," he said softly. "You changed the culture." I smiled, exhausted but unbroken. I just spoke the truth. And that, he said, was enough. As I stepped out of the hospital into the sunlight, I realized something profound. Power doesn't always come from titles or uniforms. Sometimes it comes from courage. Sometimes it comes from refusing to be silenced. And sometimes it comes from the truth, carried by someone brave enough to speak it, heard by someone willing to act. I walked away from the building with my head held high. Not because I had won a battle against a single doctor or a single hospital, but because I had survived. Because I had been seen. And because, for the first time, I felt certain that my voice mattered and that it could change the world. The hospital doors closed behind me with a soft thud, but the story didn't end there. It had only begun.